concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture. Until now.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I am your host, Grant Levac. Welcome on this special Australia Day edition of the Unexplained Rundown. If you found this channel intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. So I know your time is valuable, so thank you for taking some time, a chunk of time out of your morning, your day, your afternoon, your evening, your graveyard shift, wherever you are on this blue marble of ours. I appreciate you making today's show your live stream of choice. Got a couple of people in the chat already, so let me just say a quick hello to some folks that have joined us. We can see that we have Aotearoa, I believe Lou Jimenez can never get it right, so hopefully I haven't butchered it there. Welcome, my friend. Good to see you, Colin. We can see that we have to be trigger happy 2010 morning, Grant. First time I've been able to make a live update, and happy Australia Day. Welcome. Thank you both, and thank you all for taking some time out of your day for this look-see or this update of what has been happening on the UAP topic down under. So for those of you that follow me on Twitter, my apologies in advance if the content presented in today's show is a little on the boring side or may come across as old news. My intention is really to bring those of you that perhaps aren't well versed in the UAP topic down under, you're maybe not familiar with what's been going on, essentially just bring you up to date on what's been happening as I continue my search to find answers to the question, what is Australia doing about UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, or more correctly known as unidentified anomalous phenomena. So if you're new to this topic, you're the well-versed enthusiast, or you simply want to know what's been going on with the UAP topic down under, allow me to bring you up to speed via the following brief video summary.
Relationship between the United States and Australia, the unbreakable alliance. We spoke about the complex and changing security environment that we face. We discussed our strong strategic alignment.
We have also taken steps to create a more seamless defence industrial base between our two countries. We need to be working closer together to enhance our military capability.
Unidentified aerial phenomena are a potential national security threat, and they need to be treated that way. For too long, the stigma associated with UAPs has gotten in the way of good intelligence analysis. Pilots avoided reporting or were laughed at when they did. Today, we know better. UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real.
In what capacity, if any at all, have you been briefed on UAP?
Senator, I haven't had any specific briefings in relation to UAP since I've taken over.
And we brought many allies and international partners into our discussions on UAP.
Given how close we are to the US, has there been any discussions with Australian intelligence services or the Air Force in relation to their approach to this?
I'm not aware of any formal discussions that we've held with the US.
Navy and Air Force crews now have step-by-step procedures for reporting on a UAP on their knee board and in their post-flight debrief procedures.
Can you see a reason why would you understand why they are implementing?
No, Senator.
The message is now clear. If you see something, you need to report it.
What encouragement and reporting mechanisms are afforded to the men and women of the ADF in relation to that?
Senator, we have a really strong reporting culture. If there's anything related to safety or airworthiness issues, then we strongly encourage our pilots to report those. There's also mechanisms through standard operational means, our air traffic control.
We are committed to working together to meet and address shared challenges.
Is this a UFO question?
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong.
Really?
They're now technically
so just so I'm clear,
unidentified aerial phenomena. What do you think? Do you think it's funny?
There you have it. Talk about two completely contrasting and opposing positions on the UAP topic. I know that there was a comment in the chat there saying the audio is a little bit on the low side, so hopefully I've been able to correct that for you. If not, just give me a quick comment in the chat just to let me know. So, whilst the alliance between Australia and the US is certainly stronger than it's ever been, sadly, Australia and the US could not be further apart on the UAP topic. And in case you're wondering who that was towards the end of the clip there, that's the Australian Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Penny Wong. And yes, folks, it's clear to see that ignorance and ridicule is still alive and well across the Australian government when it comes to this topic. So I'm hopeful, though, that we'll start to see a tide change in 2023, and I guess one can only dream. So, having just watched that video package, you might be wondering, well, why the hell hasn't the Australian Chief of Air Force been briefed on UAP? Now, if you can answer that question, you're certainly smarter than I am. And you saw Scott Bray state in that video from the US public congressional hearing back in May of last year, the first public congressional hearing on UAP in more than 54 years, certainly the first in my lifetime, that both the US Air Force and the US Navy have now implemented protocols and procedures for their pilots and aviators to report observations of and encounters with UAP. So it's clear as day that the US Air Force chief knows all about UAP. Hell, we even know the US Air Force contributed to ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP and the 2022 annual report that was recently released. So why the hell hasn't the Australian Chief of Air Force been briefed on UAP? Wouldn't you want to know what's keeping your US ally and Five Eyes partner up at night? It certainly mind boggles me. So let me, I'm going to show a couple of resources today on screen just for frame of reference. So let me start with this one in particular. Now, I also mentioned the US Air Force because back on the 14th of September of last year, the Royal Australian Air Force, the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, met with his US counterpart, US Air Force Chief of Staff General C.Q. Brown Jr., who you can see is pictured on the right. They met in Washington, D.C. to discuss the future of the long-standing relationship between the US Air Force and the Royal Australian Air Force. And that meeting resulted in the signing of a joint vision statement between the RAAF and the US Air Force. What's a joint vision statement? It essentially builds on the US and the Australian strategic partnership and conveys the two countries' intent to work together to direct and support the development and operations of their air forces. Now, one would think if there was ever an opportunity for you to be briefed on UAP, it would be during those meetings. So out of curiosity, I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request in late December last year, asking not only for a copy of the joint vision statement, because I was interested to see what level of strategic collaboration there would be going forward. But I also asked for copies of meeting schedules and agendas that would form part of those meetings. Now, unfortunately, my FOIA request resulted in no meeting schedules or agendas coming back, but I did receive a copy of the joint vision statement, which I'm happy to show for you on screen and walk you through it. So let me just give you, bring up this document. So I was able to secure this document through FOIA, through the Freedom of Information Act here in Australia. And out of just so you know, if there are any FOIA requests that are made, not just by me, but by anyone, that result in documents being released, you can actually access the disclosure, the Australian Department of Defence's disclosure log. They have on their website, they list all of the FOIA requests that were processed and any documents that were released. So the link is in the description below if you would like to have a look at, periodically the defense, FOI disclosure log, because from time to time you'll see some very interesting requests that have been submitted by different folks from different strokes and on a vast variety of topics and the documents that get released. Anyway, but let's have a look at this joint vision statement. I won't read through the whole thing. Obviously, I won't bore you with it. There's I believe, a link to in the description below for this document. If not, you can find it via the Defence FOI disclosure log. So let me draw your attention to the following highlighted paragraphs. In this rapidly evolving competitive environment, we must enhance the ability of our air forces to simultaneously address today's air power challenges, develop operating concepts and capabilities for tomorrow's emerging threats, and design forces capable of adapting to whatever path the future takes. In doing so, we must be operationally resilient and capitalize on collaboration opportunities that we find now, while building our air forces that will remain effective as the future military environment rapidly evolves. With respect to objectives, one of them being, the bullet points being shared approaches to security challenges and collaboration on an effective mix of warfighting capabilities and concepts. We will do this by leveraging open, agile, and frank engagement between our air forces, managed through the Air Senior National Representative, the ASNR Forum. Moving on down further, this is again now under the topic of principles, interoperability by design. We have a rich history of operating together, incrementally raising the levels of interoperability between our air forces. This approach requires deeper information sharing and earlier collaboration in capability choices if we are to meet the joint and combined force needs of today and the demands that will be made of us in the future. Urgency. We must act quickly to meet the threats to our national security and strategic goals for the region. Critically, we must also work with our bureaucracies to accelerate achievement of our vision articulated in this joint guidance. Under future alignment, closer integration and alignment will build our collective combat power, resilience, and ability to shape, deter, and respond to the changing world. Signed by both Air Marshal Robert Chipman and Chief of Air Force, U.S. Air Force General Charles Q. Brown Jr. So when it comes to the issue of UAP, this joint vision statement isn't worth the paper that it's printed on. Shouldn't this joint vision statement apply to all of tomorrow's emerging threats, including UAP, which we know the US Department of Defense and US Congress have clearly deemed that it is? Emerging threats shouldn't just be limited to China's increasing presence in the Indo-Pacific region. Our US ally has stated time and time again that UAP pose a potential national security threat and safety of flight risk. Need we be reminded of the 11 near misses that were documented in ODNI's preliminary assessment back in June 2021. The big argument I would make is, well, China isn't just a US issue, so why is UAP? Because UAP is not isolated to the United States. Why the RAAF, the Royal Australian Air Force, continues to bury its head in the sand on this topic continues to absolutely mind-boggle me. And let's not forget, the Royal Australian Air Force laid out its strategic narrative on the entire issue of UAP in the Chief of Air Force brief on unidentified aerial phenomena that I was able to secure through FOIA of last year. And I'll just pull that document up briefly on screen so you can have a look at it. because there is some interesting commentary within. So this was the document that I was able to secure for release through FOIA of last year. CAF, which is short for Chief of Air Force, Brief on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Now, this document was produced by the Royal Australian Air Force after the former Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, was completely thrown off guard when he was pressed on the topic of UAP in Australian context by Senator Peter Whish-Wilson at the Senate estimates hearing on the 27th of October of 2021. So because he had no idea that he was going to be asked questions on UAP, this brief was prepared for him to review, for future Senate estimates, or if he was going to be pressed by members of Parliament or even the media. So if I scroll on down, we'll come on down to the section that is relevant, and I'll zoom on in so it's a little easier on the eyes for you. Strategic narrative. So without being privy to any of the classified data captured in the classified reports from ODNI, both the preliminary assessment on UAP from the 25th of June of 2021 and the recently released 2022 annual report, along with the fact that the Royal Australian Air Force ceased investigating UAP, or what they called unusual aerial sightings, UAS, as they used to refer to them, back in 1996. So they actually haven't investigated UAP since 1996. Magically, the Royal Australian Air Force was able to make a determination as to what UAP are likely to be or not likely to be. So you can see on there, on screen there, strategic narrative. UAP are likely to be one of three things: natural or other benign phenomena. And I'm still waiting for an explanation as to what other benign phenomena may represent. I haven't got a response as of yet. Anomalies with sensors or human-made technologies. UAP could be other nations' systems, either contemporary or advanced. Information regarding the collection and investigation of these systems is in the remit of the intelligence community, and is classified. So the Royal Australian Air Force leaves absolutely no room at all for the possibility of it being something else. There's no catch-all other bin that we famously recall seeing in ODNI's preliminary assessment. So either the Royal Australian Air Force knows something that our US ally doesn't, or it's continuing to take the same approach that it always has, that ignorance is bliss. And certainly while there are some that I've spoken with that believe that incidents of UAP in the US are nothing more than classified top secret tech that's being tested in civilian and restricted military airspaces and is designed to serve the purpose of being a ruse to misdirect foreign adversaries, I don't buy that argument, because UFOs have long been observed, long before the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac incident. You have reports of UAP dating back hundreds of years and across the planet and through various cultures over the centuries that, for many of them, looking back at the Indigenous Australian population, the Aboriginal communities, with their cave drawings and paintings depicting what we would call, extraterrestrial beings or entities, or greys, as is commonly referred to in pop culture. So I don't buy the argument that all UAP are secret tech. Now, some of the UAP observed are no doubt bound to be classified and secret technology, without a doubt. I'm sure the stealth bomber, the SR-71 Blackbird, the U-2 spy plane, all of which were developed in secret at Area 51. I'm sure they were tested in civilian airspace and misidentified as UAP. But for it to be all incidents of UAP that are just top secret tech, I don't buy that argument whatsoever. If we continue to read on in the CAF brief, we'll come on down to the next page, or a few pages down, I should say. As an ally of the United States, or as an ally, have the United States offered to or asked to collaborate on UAP investigations? So talking points that basically Chief of Air Force was to follow. This is really a script for him if he was asked by senators, members of parliament, or the media. No, the United States nor any other nation or ally have requested or offered to collaborate on UAP reporting or investigation. This is the kicker. Defense has no desire to seek collaboration on this issue. So the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force has absolutely no interest in the UAP topic and absolutely no desire to collaborate on the issue, despite the National Defence Authorisation Act for both fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, which was signed by President Biden on the 23rd of December last year, both of which continue to mandate that the new UAP office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARRO, coordinate with allies of the United States to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. That's their mandate, to coordinate and communicate with allies to better understand the UAP issue. But defense is flatly saying, no, we're not interested in talking to anyone on this issue. They're burying their heads in the sand. They're not even prepared to have a conversation on the topic or even acknowledge that a conversation is worth having, which is a real bloody problem. And I'm not the only one that believes that. Now, and I say that because, excuse me, regardless of whether you love the man, you hate the man, you believe him or you don't believe him, I believe this quote from Luis Elizondo absolutely hammers the nail on the head.
Anything more dangerous to a country, keep in mind that Department of Defense mission is to protect its national borders. The only thing more dangerous than our ability not to protect our national borders and our people is not to be able to have a conversation that threat exists. And that is what I objected to. We couldn't even have a conversation about it because of social stigma, and that is wrong.
Truer words could not be spoken. Even if that was said by someone other than Luis Elizondo, it would still be absolutely true. All we want is for UAPs to be acknowledged, investigated, and a conclusion reached about what UAP are and their origins, whatever they may be, wherever they may be from, or even whenever they may be from. So following the Senate estimates hearing back on the 9th of November of last year, and by the way, if you're not aware of what the Senate estimates is in Australia, it's a series of hearings that essentially allow senators to scrutinize how the executive government is spending taxpayer dollars. And at the November Senate estimates, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson pressed the Chief of Air Force on UAP, as you saw in that clip that I played at the front end of today's show. And the Chief of Air Force flatly denied having any awareness of discussions held with the US on UAP. And after some pushback from the senator, which was not included in the clip, but there's a link in the description below to the full hearing questions that the senator asked. So after some pushback from Senator Whish-Wilson, the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, volunteered to take that question on notice, which essentially means, which he was basically saying, I'm not 100% sure, let me get back to you with confirmation. And in on December 16th of last year, a response indeed came back. Now, this was the question, just so you've got it verbatim. It's highlighted on screen there. It says, Senator Whish-Wilson asked, given how close we are to the US, have there been any discussions with Australian intelligence services or the Air Force in relation to their approach? The response that came back from the Department of Defence, courtesy of the Royal Australian Air Force on the 16th of December, was the Royal Australian Air Force has not held any discussions with the United States on the topic of unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, respectfully, the Department of Defense didn't answer the senator's question in its entirety. While it may well be true that the Royal Australian Air Force has not held any discussions with the US to date on the UAP topic, what about the Australian intelligence services? There's no reference of that whatsoever. And we're talking about the Australian Signals Directorate, ASIO, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Australian Geospatial Intelligence Organisation. What about those folks? Have they been engaged by the US on the UAP topic to date? that was not addressed in the response from the Department of Defense. So I hope and anticipate that Senator Whish-Wilson will follow up on that and request confirmation as to, well, what about the intelligence services? Because it's not unreasonable to think that the US has engaged with these Australian intelligence services or organizations, because many of the US equivalents are all currently engaged on the UAP topic. We're talking about the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And the recurring theme of communication and engagement with allies and international partners keeps coming up time and time again. And I say that because on the 16th of December of last year, if I just pull up another graphic for you. On the 16th of December of last year, Ronald Moultrie, who we know as the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, along with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who we also know as the Director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, they together held an exclusive media invite-only roundtable discussion to talk about the efforts of AARO and its UAP studies to date, as well as take some questions from media that were invited. Now, if I just do a quick search on the word allies, I'm just going to highlight this paragraph for you. So in response to one of the questions, or in a statement that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick made, he said, "We are also engaging with a wide range of select partners from across academia, industry, and the scientific community, as well as our allies and partners." Now, more importantly, you'll note that, so from that, you'll note that the subject of engagement with allies keeps coming up time and time again. And if we do another quick search, and I'll just jump down to the third option here. Here we go. A question that was asked from a reporter at CNN was, do you have any reason to believe that any of the cases or instances or data you, being AARO, have looked at are indicative of something that was a threat to US national security or a military facility or US personnel? Any reason to believe that from what you have looked at so far? Dr. Kirkpatrick definitively and with one word answered yes. So that should tell you everything you need to know right there as to why UAP need to be taken seriously and investigated. And it wasn't just the media roundtable event where Dr. Kirkpatrick echoed Scott Bray's comments from the US public congressional hearing back in May. Remember, he said that they had brought many allies into discussions on UAP. And to me, the word many indicates more than 2 or 3. So that is a decent number of allies that have been brought into conversations on UAP. And so, again, let me throw another document up for frame of reference. There we go. So that theme of engagement with allies, again, was repeated in the long overdue and highly anticipated 22 annual report on UAP from the ODNI that was released earlier this month on the 12th of January. In ODNI's annual report, you'll note, if I come on down, let me just zoom on in so it's a little easier on the eyes there. If we come on down, there is a section dedicated to partnerships and collaboration. ODNI and AARO are committed to the responsible sharing of UAP findings with interagency partners such as the FAA and NASA, other stakeholders, congressional oversight, international partners, and the public. And it goes on the next page, saying, ODNI and AARO have maintained communications with our allied partners regarding UAP, keeping them informed of developments and US initiatives. So, you know, that's telling us that AARO is doing what it was mandated to do, to coordinate with allies of the United States to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. And that, you know, the repetition of engagement and allies rears its head time and time again. And if I pull up another document that just reinforces this theme of ongoing communications with allies and international partners, well, this was a slide deck that was used in a presentation given by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, and kudos to D. Dean Johnson for obtaining this document, because it's actually more interesting and insightful than what's included in ODNI's 2022 annual report. And if I come on down to page 4 of the slide deck, I've highlighted the key comments here. The potentially ubiquitous presence of UAP defines the national security implications and drives the broad range of stakeholders and demand for rigorous scientific understanding of the intelligence intelligence on phenomena. Now look under that column, a little bit hard to see, so I'll just punch it in so you can see what that looks like on the right here. Under foreign territory and operating areas, we're talking about reporting on UAP activity in foreign territory, so non-US airspace, or operating areas limited by source reliability. Allies and strategic competitors apply resources to observe, identify, and attribute UAP. And at the bottom, well, who are the key partners and stakeholders? Again, international partners. So allies of the United States are considered significant stakeholders to the effort to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. So just who in fact has the US engaged? Which allies have had discussions with the US on UAP to date? Who are the many allies that have been brought into discussions that Scott Bray testified to at the US public congressional hearing? That's the question, that's the burning question that I want an answer to, because we really don't know, with the exception of some good reporting done by our friend Daniel Otis out of Canada. So thanks to his great reporting, we now know, and this was a tweet that he posted back on November of last year. We know that the UAP task force briefed the Canadian military back in February of 2022. Members of the Pentagon's UFO task force briefed Canadian Air Force and military intelligence officials on February 22nd. And he linked basically the document that confirms that. Inquiry of Ministry, reply given by the Minister of National Defense, and the highlighted commentary. Again, let me zoom on in so it's a little easier on the eyes. Actually, I'll come out one bit. I'll read this if you can't see it. The Royal Canadian Air Force received one briefing from the US National Intelligence Manager for aviation. We remember them with their faux logo with the UFO on it, on the issue of unidentified aerial phenomena on February 22nd, 2022. The briefing was provided by multiple unidentified aerial phenomena task force officials with 10 national defense officials, including officials from the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Canadian Forces Intelligence Command in attendance. So, you know, if we look at, again, let me just pull up. Now, Daniel Otis did a really good article on this for I can't remember it's CTV News. So Daniel Otis ran this great article that essentially comprehensively documents what that briefing entailed. He goes into a lot more depth, and you can actually, if you want to read that article, if you haven't seen it before, there's a link in the description below. So it's blatantly clear that Canada is taking the issue of UAP seriously as a potential national security threat and safety and flight risk. And kudos to Canadian Member of Parliament Larry Maguire for championing and elevating the conversation on UAP in Canada, much like Senator Whish-Wilson has been doing in Australia and has been doing since October of 2021. Sadly, though, he is the only Australian senator that has and continues to show the courage and gumption to raise the issue of UAP in Australian context and ask questions. No other senator has had the courage to get off their ass and ask questions and support Senator Whish-Wilson. Now, I hope that changes in 2023 with all of the big developments that we're expecting to see out of the US Congress later this year. But other than Canada, well, who else? Who were these other many allies that the US UAP task force, AIM, SOG, and now Arrow had engaged? Which other allies and international partners did they communicate with? So who better to ask than someone that may have some pretty detailed knowledge on that particular topic. So shortly after Daniel Otis published that tweet in November, I reached out to Dr. Travis Taylor on the 1st of December, and we know that Travis Taylor, through his own admission, was the chief scientist for the UAP task force. So who better to ask, and no one better than he would know which other allies other than Canada were engaged on the topic of UAP. So I tweeted Travis Taylor. I referenced the interview that he had with John Greenwald Jr. of the Black Vault, and quote tweeted Daniel's article. And so with the hope that I was to receive a response from Dr. Travis Taylor, sadly, all I got was crickets, nothing but crickets. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe there's someone else that is better positioned to maybe respond to that question. So I thought I would tweet directly to Lou Elizondo at this, not long ago on the 13th of January. Lou Elizondo, following release of ODNI's report, a theme that struck me is ARO's commitment to the sharing of UAP findings with international partners. As an Australian advocating for greater interest from my government, are you aware of any engagement by and between US DOD and AU DOD to date? No deal. No response from Lou Elizondo on that front. So a couple of days later, I decided to reconnect. I sent another tweet. Lou Elizondo, you referenced Australia in a 2019 SCU presentation that you gave, and this is an image from that presentation that he gave, and you'll see quite clearly the Australia and New Zealand flags are well prominent. Foreign governments are interested, so implying and indicating through his comments that Australia and New Zealand are very interested on the UAP topic. Could you kindly confirm at what level within the Australian government there's a current active interest, as AU DOD's public statements to date have been to the contrary? Sadly, that was the response. Nothing. So I tried one more attempt to engage another that may have information on that front. And we now know that Jay Stratton was the director of the UAP task force, as well as ATIP, if you believe that to be true. Hi, Jay Stratton. My apologies for the unsolicited tweet, but I'm hoping you can answer a question for me. Under your leadership at the UAPTF and ATIP, are you able to confirm which international allies of the US were brought into discussions on UAP? Nothing but tumbleweed. Now, I'll admit I'm being a bit cheeky with those tweets and sound effects. And I recognize that Travis Taylor, Lou Elizondo, and Jay Stratton under no obligation to reveal any of that information, and they probably couldn't even reveal it if they indeed knew, due to maybe it being classified information. So that avenue was one that didn't bear any fruit. So I asked the question again: which of the many allies has the UAP task force, which we know then transitioned to AIMSOG, which has now become ARO? Well, who are these many allies that they've been in discussions with? So shortly following my my tweets to Travis Taylor, a gentleman by the name of Colin, who is I'm great to see him joining the show today. He's in the live chat. If you don't know who he is, he goes by the handle on Twitter of Aotearoa. I hope I've said that right and haven't butchered it like Lou Jimenez usually does. I received a Twitter from him on a DM from him on Twitter. He was asking if I'd be willing to assist him with a FOIA request, or what's called an Official Information Act OIA request, as it goes by in New Zealand, to see if he could determine if the New Zealand Ministry of Defence and the New Zealand Defence Force had held any discussions with the US on UAP. And kudos to the good work that Colin is doing in New Zealand. If you're interested to learn how he progresses with his FOIA request, do give him a follow on Twitter. He's doing some great work over there. So unfortunately, though, following the OIA requests that Colin submitted, he kindly shared with me the responses that he received. And I'll pull up the first one. This was from the New Zealand Ministry of Defence. Now, out of respect for Colin's privacy, I've just redacted his personal information. He asked for, please provide all documentary evidence confirming engagement by and between the USA's UAP Task Force, AIMSOG and ARA, and the New Zealand Defence Force and or the New Zealand Ministry of Defence on unidentified aerial phenomena. Basically this paragraph here: the Ministry of Defence has not engaged with any of the entities you mentioned, and as such has not produced any documents of the type you requested. So the New Zealand Ministry of Defence clearly had not been engaged on the topic of UAP. Well, what about the New Zealand Defence Force? Had they been engaged on UAP? So Colin kindly shared with me the response letter that he received from them. And I refer to your email of 6th of December. The key one being, again, no information concerning engagement between the New Zealand Defence Force and the agencies you identified, being UAP Task Force, AIMSOG and ARO, has been found. Your request is therefore declined under Section 18E of the OIA. So despite what Lou Elizondo had presented and discussed in 2019, that New Zealand has an active interest in the UAP topic, they certainly may well have had in the long past, but there is no real current interest or appetite on the topic by our friend across the pond, New Zealand. So again, if only Canada has been engaged today, well, who are all of these other many allies that Scott Bray testified to in front of Congress? So I decided to see if I could find out. So on the 12th of October of last year, if I just pull up this document, I submitted a US FOIA request. The first two, actually, the first on the 12th of October and the second on the 15th of December of last year, seeking, like Colin, documentary evidence of engagement by and between the UAP Task Force, AIMSOG and ARO, and the allies referenced in Scott Bray's public congressional testimony and the allies referenced in ARO's media roundtable transcript, respectively. Now, and what they've actually done is, because my requests, there were two separate requests, came in at separate times, they've done a review of the request and they determined that requests overlap in nature, which is to be expected. So they've actually aggregated them and they're going to respond under the one request 23F0037. So that's just to let you know what's highlighted on screen. Now, the one issue, the problem that we have, unfortunately, there's still a decent number of FOIA requests ahead of me. So I probably won't get a response until March, April of this year. That's when they've indicated a response may be delivered at the earliest. And when I do receive a response, whether it be with or without documents, rest assured I'll post an update on Twitter. So keep an eye, watch this space basically. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle's @GrantLevac, so feel free, and I'll be sure to keep you up to date. So again, it's really tricky to figure out, well, who are these allies that have been engaged by the US to date? Now, we don't know the answer to that other than Canada at the moment, but we're hoping that there will be more information that comes to light in the not too distant future. So let's switch gears a little, which is still on the topic of engagement with international allies. I just want to show on screen for you. There was a great article that was done by The Drive under the War Zone banner. Again, only very recently, January the 13th, Tic Tac UAP incident included in newly released range incursion reports. So The Drive published this article reporting on the US Navy's recent release of 72 range fowler reports, not fowler as in the bird, but fowler, F-A-U-L-E-R. Think of basketball if someone fouls you. Range fowler, some incursions in military training ranges and so on. But the Navy defines a range fowler as an activity or object that interrupts pre-planned training or other military activity in a military operating area or a restricted airspace. So that's obviously a much better definition than the one I gave you. The redacted documents range from 2004 to 2021 and include the range fowler report, as the Drive has indicated, includes the range fowler report from the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac incident. The documents clearly show that they were all originally classified and marked so secret. Obviously, they're heavily redacted. This is just an example. So obviously heavily classified, classified as secret, and were marked with further special instructions to only release them to approved US nationals as well. And I'll pull up the Nimitz range fowler report. Now, it's a bit hard to see there, so I'm going to zoom on in for you. So not only special instructions to only release them to approved US nationals, and those from the other 4 countries that make up the Five Eyes. And the acronym for Five Eyes is FVEY. So REL, released to USA, FVEI, Five Eyes. The Five Eyes intelligence block includes Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, and our friends across the pond, New Zealand. So what do you know? These 72 range fowler reports, classified reports, range fowler reporting forms, were available for release to the Five Eyes. Now, you can actually, if you go to the US Navy's reading room, and I think there's a link to this in the Drive article, and the article is linked in the description below, you can actually have a read through all of the released range fowler reports. And if I just scroll down through a few of them, you'll see that all of them have the same classification, secret / release to USA, Five Eyes. So it begs the question, well, of all of these 72 released range fowler reporting forms, were any of them disseminated to Five Eye countries? And I reached out to Daniel Otis and asked him the question. So again, Daniel did the great reporting that revealed Canada had been engaged by the UAP task force. So I reached out to him and asked him, if are you aware of any range fowler reports being received by Canada? Now, he wasn't at the time that he responded to my DM, which is only a few days ago. He found the revelation to be quite interesting, and mentioned that it's a line of inquiry that he'll be exploring in the future. The potential challenge, though, is that classified information that one country receives from another may be withheld from release because it's from an international, it's from a foreign government. So there may be a roadblock there. But I was wondering, well, okay, well, what about Australia? You know, Australia's part of the Five Eyes intelligence block. Did it receive any of those classified range fowler reporting forms that document, incursions in airspace used for training exercises by the US DoD? So a few days ago, I submitted a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information request down under, for any range fowler reporting forms that the Australian Department of Defence, the Royal Australian Air Force, the Defence Space Command, and the Royal Australian Navy may have received. Now, will that request bear any fruit? I have no idea. Who knows? It's a bit of a dart throw wearing a blindfold. But I'm of the opinion that it's always better to try and fail rather than fail because you never tried. So it's worth a shot nonetheless. And in case you're wondering what the Five Eyes or the FVEI is, it's an intelligence alliance comprising of Australia, as I mentioned, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Kind of a treaty, if you will, for joint cooperation in signals intelligence. So, well, you might be asking, what is signals intelligence? According to BAE Systems, signals intelligence is a category of intelligence gathering, most often by military or intelligence agency personnel, comprised of the messages and data of one or more parties and collected using any combination of communications, electronic or foreign instrumentation signals intelligence, regardless of how the information was transmitted. This could include, and this is the key, verbal communications, written messages, data from radar or weapon systems. So we're talking about FLIR and so on, and more. And so I find it very interesting that the classified US Navy range fowler reports pertaining to UAP were available for dissemination to members of the Five Eyes. Now, why do I harp on that? Because in reviewing some of the documentation that I've been able to secure over the last year, I guess, this was one that I received from the Royal Australian Air Force. I've been asking the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force time and time again. I've repeatedly asked them, why is Australia not doing anything about UAP? Why is Australia not taking the issue of UAP seriously when our US ally and Five Eyes partner is? And so a response letter to an inquiry that I made, I received from the head of Air Force capability on the 26th of July of last year from RJ Denny. His response, and this is the key one, the Five Eyes is an intelligence alliance comprising of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. Air Force does not lead on these forums. Fair call. Air Force does not consider this the appropriate platform to discuss the topic of UAP or UFO. Well, why then has the US Navy made the 72 classified range fowler reports available for release to the Five Eyes? It seems pretty clear to me that the Five Eyes is the appropriate forum or platform, or one of the appropriate platforms, to discuss the topic of UFO or UAP. So that seems to be in stark contrast to the availability of those range fowler reports being available for release to Five Eyes. So now the challenge that we have, if I just show you briefly on screen who makes up the Five Eyes intelligence organizations. So if I just pull this one up on screen, from the perspective of Australia, and again, let me punch on in so it's a bit easier on the eyes there. So with respect to Australia, the intelligence organizations that make up the Five Eyes is the Australian Secret Intelligence Services, Australian Signals Directorate, which I mentioned before, Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, known as ASIO, the Australian Geospatial Intelligence Organisation, and the Defence Intelligence Organisation. We can see the equivalents across Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The CIA, the DIA, the FBI, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency. And wouldn't you know it, if we look at so pull up the information published on the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner as it pertains to freedom of information, wouldn't you indeed know it, that the following organizations, intelligence organizations, are exempt from FOI. Australian Seeker Intelligence Service, ASIO, Australian Signals Directorate, Australian Geospatial Intelligence Organisation. So the challenge that I guess we have is that we're unlikely to ever get an answer as to whether the range fowler reports were disseminated to these intelligence organizations. But this all comes back to the question that Senator Whish-Wilson asked at the Senate estimates. Now, I can't get a response to that question. Well, which intelligence organizations potentially received range fowler reports, because those agencies are exempt from FOI. They don't have to release any documents. But that's not necessarily true if the question is asked by a senator. And that question was asked by a senator, Senator Whish-Wilson. And so I hope that he continues to press and voice his dissatisfaction with the half-assed response that the Australian Department of Defence gave in response to his question on notes. Remember, he asked the question at the Senate estimates, given how close we are to the US, have there been any discussions with Australian intelligence services or the Air Force in relation to their approach? So that is an avenue that perhaps he can potentially pursue. Now, whilst those intelligence organizations are exempt from FOI, it is worthy to note that, again, I've got another screen I can share with you. It is worthy to note that some records can be made available for release through the National Archives of Australia, comparable with the National Archives in the US. Now, case in point, ASIO and DIO, Defence Intelligence Organisation records, are eligible for public release via an application to the National Archives of Australia once they enter their open access period. And for most records, this is a 20-year window. So in other words, I could go to the National Archives of Australia, submit an application, say, I want to see any documents that were in the possession of ASIO or the DIO that pertain to UAP up to the date including January of 2003, 20 years ago. So on a whim, back in November of last year, I decided to see if there are any ASIO or DIO records for the period the 1st of January 1993. That year, there was a policy recommendation made to the then Chief of the Air Staff, which is the equivalent of the Chief of Air Force, that unusual aerial sightings, now UAP as we know them, UAS was the terminology for Australia. So in 1993, a policy recommendation was made that the Royal Australian Air Force cease its investigation, its handling of UAP reports. So I went for a date range from the 1st of January 1993 to the 28th of November of 2002, 20 years before I made obviously capturing that 20-year window from the date that I made the request. Looking for records or documents across any of those standard UAP keywords. Now, unfortunately, the response that I received from the National Archives of Australia, unidentified aerial phenomena sightings, reporting and investigation have never been an ASIO responsibility function under the ASIO Act, and as such, they would be very unlikely to hold any records. Well, did you even look? I mean, if unlikely, that doesn't tell me if you actually performed a search. They instead focus on individuals and groups that may be a threat to national security. So sadly, nada on that front. I'm still waiting for a response from the National Archives of Australia with respect to records pertaining to the Defence Intelligence Organisation on UAP, but nothing from ASIO to date, which is interesting because ASIO in the past have been on distribution lists from the United States that contain information pertaining to UFO reports. And those communications, which were secured through FOIA, are readily available and accessible via the blackvault.com. So if you want to have a look at those documents, that kind of like cables, secure communications that were sent, not just to ASIO and DIO and many other intelligence organizations, not just within the US, but internationally that pertain to UFO, you can find them on the blackvault.com. So suffice it to say, the National Archives of Australia's no document response is one that I find to be very odd, to say the least, because we have documents that show that information has been disseminated to ASIO and DIO in the past, in the early 2000s and late 90s pertaining to the UAP. So just wanted to kind of show you that that was another avenue that I had attempted to pursue. Again, haven't received word back from DIO, National Australia Archives with respect to DIO, so I'll continue to keep you posted on that one. But for now, alas, as they say, onwards and upwards. What I wanted to kind of switch gears, and I'm mindful of everyone's time, and I will recognize folks in the chat in just a moment. I just want to show you one other or two other documents. Some wonderful news that came out of San Marino last week. So on the 19th of January, Christopher Sharp of the Liberation Times reported that the Parliament of San Marino voted in favour to participate in Project Titan, meaning San Marino will submit a proposal to the UN, to the United Nations, for the creation of a permanent office tasked with the preparation of periodic global conferences dedicated to the scientific study of UFOs, as we now know, unidentified anomalous phenomena. The proposal will now be submitted to the UN's Secretary General before undergoing a preliminary examination and discussion. Following this, the proposal would be submitted to a vote at the General Assembly. Now, this is huge news. This is big news, and has the potential for UAP to be taken incredibly seriously by all UN member nations, including Australia, which is a founding member. So why do I tell you this? Well, a gentleman by the name of Mitchell Peter Fifield is the permanent representative of Australia to the United Nations. And who is Mitch Fifield's boss under the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade? You guessed it. It's none other than the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Peter Wong.
Of reports, I did raise this with the previous Air Marshal as well, of US military exercises being cancelled because of concerns around air safety and observations of UAPs.
Is this a UFO question?
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong. They're now technically
so just so I'm clear,
unidentified aerial phenomena. What do you think? Do you think it's funny?
I haven't been here for. Well, I don't think I've asked questions about this.
Okay. Well,
I'm not sure we can. Can we assist at all?
That still gets my blood boiling, and if it pisses you off as well, then rightly so. And kudos to Senator Whish-Wilson for putting Senator Wong in her place with her ignorance and concealed giggling and ridicule of the topic. So in an effort to help educate Senator Penny Wong, I sent both her and Mitch Fifield a tweet with a link, and this was only a couple of days ago, I believe, on the 20th of January, with a link to the Liberation Times article and a courtesy heads up that the UAP issue is now set to be discussed at the United Nations, and encourage them both to get up to speed and be fully acquainted on the topic before representing our country at the UN, because the last thing we need is another reaction like Senator Wong's at the United Nations. So we also have closer to home. We know that next month there is a follow-up Senate estimates hearing, and I know that based on my ongoing engagement with Senator Whish-Wilson and his office, that he has a number of additional questions that he and his staff have been preparing and will be submitting, so we can see hopefully some further questions being posed to the Australian Department of Defence on this topic in the coming weeks and months. So what can you do to help? Between now and next month's Senate estimates, there's actually plenty of things that you can do to help. I would implore you to reach out to your elected representative, your senator, your member of parliament, even reach out to Senator Penny Wong if you wish, and implore them to take the topic of unidentified anomalous phenomena seriously. Give them a call, write them a letter, snail mail, send them an email, maybe send them an email with a link to the Liberation Times article included, or if you want to send them a tweet, feel free. Just do something to highlight the importance of the UAP topic from a potential national security and safety of flight risk perspective, and the need for the Australian government and Department of Defence to acknowledge that the issue that our Five Eyes partner, both Canada and the US, are taking very seriously. We need to now have an adult conversation on the topic without those snide remarks, the concealed giggling, and the ridicule that we've seen time and time again across the Australian government and the Australian Department of Defence. We need to have an adult conversation on that topic, on this topic, and that can all start with you if you engage your elected representatives on this topic. So we're coming to the end here, folks. I know this has been a lot of content for you to digest. I really appreciate all of the comments that you've made in the chat. There have been far too many for me to show all of them, but let me just pull up a couple. There we go. That's a fair point. Harry Bridges, don't be too hard on Penny. There is a lot to catch up on. That is a good point. However, at least acknowledging that this is something that a conversation should be had on, I think is important. Comment from Paul. Wong's reaction said it all. Australian government is a joke. At least from our good friend UAP Aotearoa, at least questions are being asked in Australia. In New Zealand, nothing, crickets. So I feel for you, Colin, my friend. Hopefully you'll get some elected representatives in New Zealand that start to see Senator Whish-Wilson's efforts down under. Comment from To Be Trigger Happy 2010. There is clearly a lot of pressure from the US public being put on the US government. Are we seeing the same kind of enthusiasm from Australians in Australia? Well, apart from Senator Whish-Wilson and folks like myself and others that have taken upon themselves to engage their elected representatives, and the likes of Ross Coulthart, Paul Dean, you have Keith Basterfield, Bill Chalker. Those guys, I'm standing on the shoulders of those giants. Those guys have been at this for a much, much longer time than I have. And I've been thankful that I've been able to learn a lot from those guys. So there are a lot of veterans in the space that are pushing for advocacy from our government, that they have greater interest. It's just a slow burn, unfortunately. But I do believe that the more people that engage their elected representatives on this topic, which was the key theme of the Big Phone Home, which I still continue to credit Luis Jimenez. If it wasn't for him and the Big Phone Home, I would never have gotten off my ass and got in the game rather than sitting on the sidelines on this topic. Got to love Senator Surfer, absolutely. Thank you, Harry. Thanks for doing this FOIA request and getting them out for people to see. We have, see if we got some other comments that have come through. Ryan Spray, great to see you, my friend. Greetings from Scotland. Enjoying this, my friend. I saw that UAP Aotearoa got a response. I owe him a message, so know there'll be some correspondence between you both and not just in future. Five Eyes appear to be only too normalized, US and Canada. Boo, 100%. I agree with you. Chili Farm Brisbane, don't forget that presentation by Lou was given at a TTSA brief, not US government. Very true, good point, but I still think that the quote that he made is true on all fronts. Not even pertaining to the UAP topic. If there is something that is a national security, potential national security threat or safety of flight risk, which we know is the whole crux of the UAP issue, but if it was a national security threat, you would at least hope that the US Department of Defense is going to acknowledge that it needs to have a conversation on that topic. Thank you again, Harry. Good on you for highlighting the range failure reports. They're dynamite. Can't believe the mainstream media has ignored them for this long. I 100% agree with you. There we go. Some comments from Ryan. UAP, Aotearoa, great point, especially the minute paper by the Australian Department of Defence on scientific intelligence aspects of the UFO problem from May 1971. A lot of great historical documents are available and readily accessible through the National Archives of Australia. So if you jump on there and you just want to have a look at some of the historical documents, one thing to note, Australia's had almost as long as a history in investigating UAP and UFOs as the US, dating back to the early 50s under O.H. Turner, Harry Turner, who was kind of like the equivalent of J. Allen Hynek in Australia. He did some incredible scientific analysis, investigation of this topic and tried to push for and advocate for greater scientific scrutiny and investigation. And unfortunately, his words fell on deaf ears. We have comment, Kelly Clark. Let's hope you do get a response from your FOIA request. Definitely worth a shot. Thank you, Kelly. I'll certainly keep you posted. We have Clint. Good morning, mate. Thank you for joining. And final comment, Harry Bridges. Thank you for your comments. Good on you, Grant. Appreciate your support. So as we come back to the end here, folks, before I go, I just wanted to share with you some exciting news and give a bit of a shameless plug. Back in June of last year, I was invited to participate in a 6-part documentary series, which was untitled at the time, but has since been aptly named, if I pull up the screenshot here for you, Close Encounters Down Under. And I was really thrilled and honored to be asked to participate in this project. I don't think there's been something as comprehensive as this done in Australia. It's set to premiere in Australia later this year on the 7 network via 7 Mate. What's it all about? You might be asking. Well, it's the most from the website, from the producer's website pertaining to the documentary. They state the premise: it's the most comprehensive investigation into close encounters in Australia and New Zealand ever undertaken, revealing untold stories of UFO sightings, abductions, and other paranormal events. From the Alps of New Zealand to the rugged Australian outback, every episode is packed with rare footage, recently declassified archives, and chilling first-hand accounts. Eyewitnesses, experiences, experts, researchers, and eccentrics weigh in on everything from recent events, decades-old mysteries, and ancient lore as they share eerie tales of the most popular extraterrestrial hotspot on Earth. And so on that note, folks, let me leave you with a sneak peek at Close Encounters Down Under.
What type of aircraft is it? I cannot confirm. It's 4 bright, seems to be like landing lights. It's hovering and it's not an aircraft.
Nothing was ever found of him or his plane. It just virtually disappeared into thin air.
UFOs have appeared everywhere in Australia.
And there's probably so much more anomalous activity based on just the vast size of our country.
I have no idea what this thing is. The UFO had returned.
Whether it's a metropolitan city, a large town, a country road.
UFOs are out there, UFOs are real. It's no longer science fiction, it's really science fact these days.
I couldn't make it correlate to anything that I'd ever seen before.
Oh, there we go.
Gone. It's gone.
Seems to be playing some sort of game.
We might not be the only intelligence here in the universe.
These crafts defy the known laws of physics.
cannot identify it. It has such speed.
We cannot ignore the possibility that some objects in the sky are of extraterrestrial origin. In our case is whether we are unique as an intelligent species, or maybe there is a smarter kid on our cosmic block.
So keep a lookout for that one. I'm really, really excited to see that series. Even if I wasn't invited to participate, I would be just as excited to see it, because there's a lot of great individuals that are involved in that project. Obviously, you saw Dr. Professor Avi Loeb at the very end there as well. So they've certainly engaged folks across the whole international spectrum on this topic. Now, a number of the episodes have already aired on Blaze TV in the UK. So if there's anyone joining today that's in the UK or subscribes to Blaze TV, you can watch that now. I believe it is, and a release date has not been made for Australia, but I don't think we'll be waiting that much longer for it. So as soon as I know, I'll be sure, and there'll be probably others that tell me because I won't be the first to know. But I'll keep you updated on Twitter. So if you do want to follow me, feel free to give me a follow. My handle is @GrantLevac. So that's it for today's, folks. Again, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your morning, your day, your afternoon, your evening, your graveyard shift. I hope you found this content of value. And particularly as today is Australia Day, public holiday for a lot of folks, I really appreciate you being with me and watching this live stream. Quick final reminder that the clips and a lot of the materials referenced in today's show are linked in the description below. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, I kindly ask that you give it one of these, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, sharing this video with your friends, your family, your social network if you think they'll find the content of interest. And if you'd like to continue following my journey on the UAP topic, feel free to give us a follow on Spotify. The Unexplained Rundown is now on Spotify, so if you like to listen to your podcast there, feel free and subscribe to this channel. And of course, if you want to be notified whenever I go live, premiere new video, as always, be sure to ring that cowbell. So thanks again, folks, for hanging out with me. I look forward to seeing you again on a future episode of the Unexplained Rundown, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Australia Day. Bye.
concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying objects?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture.